HDR is short for high dynamic range. It refers to an image that displays both extremely bright highlights and deep shadows without loss of detail. At this time, most digital cameras are not capable of capturing extreme differences in light, so there must be a trade-off. You either capture details in the highlight areas or details in shadow areas, but not in both. However, if you shoot a scene with extreme differences in highlights and shadows multiple times using different exposures for each shot, and then combine these shots into one, you can produce an HDR image and get around the limitations of the sensor. Right now, the best way to create a true HDR image in Lightroom is to go to Photoshop. In this video, I'll show you how. Photoshop offers an HDR feature that does a good job of combining multiple images into one. Let's see how to use it. In Lightroom, select the images you want to combine into a single HDR photo. Make sure you have a range of over and underexposed images. It's best if while capturing the image, you changed your exposure by varying the shutter speed rather than the f-stop. When you change the f-stop, it changes the depth of field, which affects the final outcome when you merge the different images. I'm going to choose 5 images that range from 3 stops under to 3 stops over. Once the files are selected in Lightroom, I can use one of 2 methods to bring the images into Photoshop. The first method is the easiest. I simply right-click on one of my selected images and choose Edit In from the contextual menu that appears, and then choose the Merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop link. The problem with this method is it exports my images in 16-bit, and that can really slow down the process. However, it also produces the best quality, so there is an advantage to doing it this way. The second method uses an export preset that I've created to deliver smaller files into Photoshop at 8 bits per pixel. I'll get a faster result, but with less quality. After sending my files into Photoshop, there's a lag while the images are exported and processed in HDR Pro. Once the process is complete, the HDR Pro dialog window will open in Photoshop with various options. Let's walk through these options. I always start with the presets. Some of them create wild effects, but I find it useful to observe what happens to my other options below when I select them. Let's stay with photorealistic, and then go to the options that follow to customize the look. I'm going to leave the mode set to 16-bit and leave local adaptation set. Under Edge Glow, I slide the strength slider back and forth to observe the effect. I'm looking to minimize the halo effect around contrast edges. The radius slider controls the size of the glow effect, and I move that radically left and right as well, settling on an optimal setting. Under Tone and Detail, Gamma adjusts the difference between shadow and highlight, while Exposure affects the overall tonal brightness. Move the sliders until you're satisfied with the results. Detail sets the amount of contrast in the detail parts of the image. Low values give an image a soft, dreamy look, while high values create a very stark, contrasty look. Under Advanced, Shadow and Highlight adjust the brightness of those regions independently. You should be familiar with vibrance and saturation settings from Lightroom. Saturation affects all the colors equally, while vibrance affects mostly the primary colors. HDR Pro also has a curve to fine-tune your tonal values. Generally, I do these adjustments if necessary later when I'm back in Lightroom. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just spend a minute here fine-tuning this, get it the way I like. Okay, now we're looking good. Now there's one last thing. You may notice here there's a blur in the middle of this image, and that's because there was a man walking in front of the scene while I was shooting the different exposures. Now I had the camera on a tripod, so everything else is very sharp. We just have that blur. And the question is, how do we get rid of that? And Photoshop HDR Pro has this wonderful feature up here called Remove Ghosts. I'm going to go ahead and select that now. And you can see what happens. It's going through the thumbnails you see down here on the bottom, and it's basically choosing one which it will then use anything that's moved as its solid point. So you see the green line around this thumbnail. It has chosen that one where the man is in that position. I can choose another position if I want by selecting the thumbnail over here, and now you see the man is not blurred, but it's now choosing this position from this particular frame. So this is a really cool feature that allows you to shoot HDR even when you have moving objects in the picture. And this is something that was very difficult to do before. Okay, so when you're finished and you've got what you like, all you have to do is select OK, and you're done. Okay, so with this final picture, we have something that could never have been done just with the camera and one shot alone. We have details in the dark, deep shadow area of the trees, and we also have detail up there in the very bright areas of the sky. This is truly high dynamic range.